Joining me now is the Shadow Agriculture Minister, Joel Fitzgibbon, live from Melbourne this morning. Shadow Minister, thank you for your time. Do you think this is a reasonable request from the Prime Minister?
Good morning, Laura. Great to be with you. Look, I think it's another distraction. You know, I was at the centre of things back during the Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria. Kevin Rudd, the then Prime Minister, was very quick to act. We had a number of crisis meetings very, very early on. We called out the Army Reserves. They were there by the evening of the next day. I don't recall having any difficulty whatsoever, I was the Defence Minister, engaging with the states or securing the power or the authority I needed or we needed to do what we needed to do. I mean, what's implicit in what the Prime Minister is saying is that he knows better than state leaders. Well, that's a big call. And again, I think it's just another distraction.
Don't the events over the summer show that that call was perhaps too late, though, and he might have a point?
Well, the events over the summer show that the Prime Minister acted too late himself. Now he's trying to blame it. Well, he was very slow to act. Remember, he downplayed
what
the fires.
What more could he have done?
Well, he downplayed the fires when people were appealing for more assistance for volunteer firefighters. He told the country that they are happy, they have the resources they need, and in fact they are happy to be out there. I've not experienced in my time any difficulty.
But are you talking about the water-bombing aircraft, and isn't that up to the states?
Well, he rejected Labor's call for more water-bombing resources.
But what I'm saying is, isn't that up to the states?
Laura, what I'm saying is I was on the fire ground in my own electorate in November, December, and we couldn't secure aerial assets because they were fully deployed and there simply weren't enough resources. And yet Scott Morrison rejected Labor's proposal to put more resources into aerial assets. So he's made all these mistakes. Look, no one in Australia, Laura, believes that the Prime Minister acted quickly enough in response to these fires. No one believes he put sufficient resources into them. And now he's trying to blame a process which, in my experience, is not broken.
Well, you haven't mentioned climate change yet. There's been a big debate over that over the summer amidst this crisis. What's your view on the climate change factor over the summer?
Well, the fires have demonstrated to the country more generally what we can expect if the world allows temperatures to continue to rise. We'll have out of the order weather events of all kinds. So the climate change, or the need to act on climate change, I think just was raised in the community awareness. And again, Scott Morrison's denialism has been called out. I mean, every day almost he tells us that he's on track to meet his 26 to 28% target, and yet his own department tells us that is not true. So we'll see what he says at the press club today, whether he's prepared at last to start taking the changing climate seriously and to start taking serious action.
Well, Labor doesn't even have a target at the moment. I'm not asking you to put a figure on it this morning, but will it be higher than that 26 to 28%?
What you can be certain of, Laura, is that the Labor Party will always take more serious and more urgent action than a coalition which has now been in power for more than 6 years and has presided over not falling carbon emissions, but growing carbon emissions, and presided over a period in which investment in renewable technologies is not growing, but falling. And that's a very, very bad track record. The Prime Minister today has an opportunity to admit that he's been wrong and to start becoming serious about action on climate change.
Sure, but at the moment Labor's only talking about, you know, being more of a cheerleader and having, you know, stronger action, but not actually setting targets. Now, you and your electorate are caught between a rock and a hard place in many ways. How does more ambition and getting emissions down affect jobs of coal miners, for example, in your electorate?
Well, it doesn't, Laura, and this is one of the great myths of this climate change debate. Under the Paris rules, we are accountable for the emissions which we emit in our own country. The great bulk of coal, both metallurgical and thermal coal in this country, including in my own region, is exported. Some of it goes to countries seeking themselves to reduce their emissions, big emitters like India and China, who do need both a thermal and metallurgical coal to modernise and clean up their own economies. Of course, I have coal-fired power generation, but it is obvious that those generators will all operate until they come to the end of their physical and economic lives. In the case of Liddell, for example, that's in only a few years' time. So we can make this transition. Oh, and I should say that in my own region, we are working very, very hard to remain the powerhouse of New South Wales by attracting investment and building newer forms of generation, including, of course, pumped hydro and some gas peaking stations. Gas will be a very, very important baseload transition fuel to a more modern and clean economy.
But you lost 17% of your vote to One Nation at the last election with the current climate change plan that you had under Bill Shorten. So are you going to be as ambitious, less ambitious? I mean, what are you going to sell to your electorate?
Well, just what I just shared with you, that we can be ambitious on climate change. We can do enough on the global front to give us the credibility we need to preach the gospel to those who aren't doing enough. And that's the important thing here. Acting alone, we can't make a difference, but acting collectively globally, we certainly can reduce emissions, and we need to be able to demonstrate to the rest of the world that we are pulling our weight and doing our share. And under the current Prime Minister, again, emissions are not falling, but they are rising, although I accept there was a small fall in the last quarter or two, but that was largely attributable to the drought. Of course, the land sector is making a large contribution as well. And we need to get some of the focus off fossil fuels, which of course are an important part of the equation, and start looking at the whole of the economy and emissions that come from the land sector, the transport sector, the industrial sector. Now, we had a policy going into the last election to assist farmers become part of the carbon economy, earning income from their practices on the land. And of course, the government opposed that policy. We had a policy to bring forward investment in plantations, forest plantations, a policy again Scott Morrison opposed. So there are some great things we can do out there if Scott Morrison would just get out of the way.
Okay, one final question when it comes to bushfire payments and assistance that farmers and residents are getting. We've seen smoke, particularly in your electorate, have a huge impact on wine producers and grape growers, but there seems to be a bit of black spot there, but because they're affected by the smoke and not the fire, they're not receiving those grants. Is that a fair assessment?
And this is ridiculous, Laura. If you lose your vines, your grapes to a flame, you secure the assistance, but if your grapes are affected by the smoke from the same flames, you do not. And that's a terrible anomaly. I have to say I've had a conversation with David Littleproud about this, and I'm hopeful that he might address this problem. Of course, in my own region, my people have been disadvantaged by these grants to local councils. The government extended the number of councils yesterday, but Singleton in my electorate missed out again. Neighbouring Muswellbrook is securing the assistance. They are in the same region, they have the same climate, they have very similar workforces and economic architectures. People, of course, cross local government boundaries to go to and from work, and yet Singleton again yesterday was denied. And of course, we wake up this morning to learn that Bridget McKenzie pre-election was giving money to councils outside the criteria, including Moyne Council, of course, which was not in drought, and yet local government areas like my own in Singleton are still missing out.